The room went silent. Dead silent. The kind of quiet that happens right before a gunshot. I was on my knees, shaking, reaching for the silver necklace I'd hidden for 5 years. But his hand got there first. A hand covered in scars and rings worth more than my life. Adrian Moretti. The capo of New York snapped the locket open. His eyes, usually cold as ice, burned with sudden, terrifying rage. He looked at the photo inside, then at me, and roared the words that changed everything. "That's my brother's face. Why do you have a picture of a dead man?" The Obsidian Club didn't smell like a bar. It smelled of old money, imported leather, and the metallic tang of fear. Lucy Gabrielle adjusted her apron, wincing as the stiff fabric rubbed against the bruise on her hip, a parting gift from her landlord when she was 2 days late on rent. She took a deep breath, smoothing back a stray lock of chestnut hair. She couldn't afford to be messy. Not tonight. Tonight, the high table was in. "Lucy, table 4, don't look them in the eye, drop the scotch and get out," the floor manager Marco hissed, shoving a heavy tray into her hands. "And for God's sake, hide that necklace. It looks cheap." Lucy instinctively clutched the silver locket, hidden beneath her uniform. It was anything but cheap. It was the only thing she had left of him. "I'll be careful, Marco." She navigated the dimly lit room. The patrons here weren't tourists. They were sharks in bespoke suits. In the center booth sat the great white shark himself, Adrian Moretti. Even from a distance, Adrian was terrifying. He didn't lounge. He occupied space with a predator's tension. He had dark hair swept back a jawline that could cut glass and eyes that were completely void of emotion. Rumor had it he had taken over the Moretti crime family 5 years ago, after his younger brother Julian was brutally murdered in a car bombing. Since then, Adrian had turned New York into a fortress. Lucy approached the table. Her hands trembled. She set the crystal glasses down. 1, 2, 3. "Leave the bottle," a voice grumbled. It was Luca Adrian's second in command, a man with a nose that had been broken too many times. "Yes, sir," Lucy whispered. She reached across the table to place the coaster for Adrian. He didn't move, but his gaze shifted to her hand. He hated weakness. He hated trembling. Just as she began to pull back, a drunken associate from the neighboring table stumbled, lurching backward. He slammed into Lucy's back with the force of a linebacker. Crash, the tray tipped. A $200 bottle of scotch shattered against the edge of the marble table. Shards of glass flew like shrapnel. Amber liquid splashed onto Adrian Moretti's pristine Italian suit. The entire club gasped. The music didn't stop, but the atmosphere evaporated. Lucy fell to her knees, glass slicing into her palms. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, sir." She grabbed napkins, frantically dabbing at the spilled liquor, pooling near Adrian's polished shoes. Adrian stood up slowly. The sound of his chair scraping the floor was deafening. He looked down at his ruined suit, then at the trembling waitress. "Get her out of here," Adrian said, his voice low and bored. "Before I lose my temper." Luca stepped forward, grabbing Lucy by the arm. "You heard the boss." Lucy scrambled to stand, but in the scuffle the clasp of her uniform blouse had come undone. As Luca yanked her up the silver locket, she always kept tucked away, swung free. It caught on the edge of the table. Snap! The chain broke. The locket spun across the black marble surface, sliding right under Adrian's hand. It popped open upon impact. Lucy froze. The breath left her lungs. "No." Adrian looked down. He was about to flick the cheap jewelry away, but something caught his eye. A tiny, sepia-toned photograph inside the oval frame. He went still. The silence in the room shifted from awkward to lethal. Adrian slowly picked up the locket. His thumb brushed the face in the picture. A face that mirrored his own, but with softer eyes and a crooked smile. Adrian's head snapped up. His eyes locked onto Lucy's. The boredom was gone, replaced by a storm of confusion and violent recognition. "Where did you get this?" he demanded. Lucy couldn't speak. She tried to pull away from Luca, but his grip tightened. Adrian walked around the table. He moved like a wolf closing in on a trapped rabbit. He held the locket up, inches from her face. "I asked you a question," Adrian roared, his voice shaking the walls. "This is my brother. This is Julian. He's been dead for 5 years. Why does a waitress have a picture of a dead Moretti inside her locket?" I found it," Lucy lied, her voice cracking. "I bought it at a pawn shop." Adrian's eyes narrowed. He pressed a button on the side of the locket. A hidden mechanism clicked something only a Moretti would know about. The back of the locket sprang open, revealing an engraving. "To E, my forever. J." Adrian read the inscription. He looked at Lucy. "Your name tag says Lucy." She stopped breathing. "Take her to the car," Adrian ordered, pocketing the locket. "Nobody leaves until I find out who she really is." "Please, I have to go home," Lucy screamed as Luca dragged her toward the back exit. "My son is waiting for me." Adrian paused. He turned back, his silhouette framed by the dim club lights. "You don't have a home anymore, Lucy. Not until I decide if you're a ghost, a spy, or a liability I need to erase." The ride to the Moretti estate was a blur of rain-slicked streets and suffocating silence. Lucy sat in the back of the black SUV, sandwiched between 2 guards. Her hands were not bound, but they might as well have been. She closed her eyes, praying Mrs. Higgins, her neighbor, wouldn't leave Leo alone when she didn't come home. Leo. He was 4 years old. He had his father's smile and his uncle's temper. If Adrian saw him, if Adrian knew. The car crunched over gravel. They had arrived at the Fortress, a sprawling Gothic mansion on the cliffs of Long Island. Lucy was marched into a study that was larger than her entire apartment. The walls were lined with books and weapons, antique muskets crossed with modern assault rifles. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting long, dancing shadows. Adrian stood by the window, staring out at the storm. He held a glass of whiskey in one hand and her locket in the other. "Sit," he commanded, not turning around. Lucy sat in the high-backed leather chair. She wrapped her cardigan tight around herself. "Mr. Moretti, please. I didn't steal it. He gave it to me." Adrian turned. "He gave it to you, Julian?" "Yes." Julian was engaged to the daughter of the Chicago outfit when he died. A political match. He didn't have a girlfriend. Adrian walked over, leaning against the heavy oak desk. "So tell me, Lucy, were you his whore, or were you the one who set him up? I loved him." Lucy shouted, the anger overriding her fear. "I didn't know who he was. He told me his name was Jay. We met at a coffee shop in Brooklyn. He was kind. He wasn't like you." Adrian flinched. The comparison stung, though he didn't show it. Jay. He used his middle name. Clever. He swirled his drink. "You said forever in the inscription. How long did you know him?" 6 months. Lucy whispered, tears stinging her eyes. "He was going to leave the family business. He said he had a way out. The night he died, he was coming to pick me up. We were going to run away together." Adrian slammed his glass down on the desk, shattering it. Liar! Lucy jumped. Julian never wanted out. He was the heir. He was born for this life. Adrian paced the room, his composure cracking. He died in a car bombing meant for me. He took my car that night. If he was coming to get you, why was he driving towards the docks? I don't know, Lucy sobbed. I waited for him all night. He never came. Then I saw the news. Adrian studied her. She looked broken, genuine. But in his world, innocence was usually a mask for treachery. You mentioned a son, Adrian said, his voice dropping an octave. In the club. You said your son was waiting. Lucy's blood ran cold. This was the danger zone. He's with a sitter. How old is he? 4, she said too quickly. Adrian did the math. Julian died 5 years ago. If the child was 4, who is the father? Adrian asked, stepping closer. An ex, she lied. A guy I met after Jay died. Adrian stared at her, analyzing every micro-expression. He walked around the desk and stood right in front of her. He reached out, tilting her chin up with a rough finger. You're a terrible liar, Lucy. He pulled a cell phone from his pocket. Luca, go to the address on her employment file. Bring the boy here. No. Lucy lunged at him, clawing at his suit. Don't you touch him. He has nothing to do with this. Adrian, please. Adrian caught her wrists easily, pinning them to her chest. His face was inches from hers. She could smell the whiskey and the expensive sandalwood soap. For a second, the heat between them wasn't just anger. It was electric. If the boy is yours and you loved my brother, Adrian said, his voice a dangerous rumble, then I need to know if my brother left anything else behind besides a grieving waitress. He's mine, Lucy hissed. He's not part of your world. Everyone is part of my world, Lucy. They just don't know it yet. 2 hours later, the heavy oak doors opened. Luca walked in, holding the hand of a sleepy, confused little boy in blue dinosaur pajamas. Leo rubbed his eyes, clutching a stuffed bear. He looked up at the room, terrified, until he saw Lucy. Mummy. Lucy broke free from the guard and ran to him, scooping him up. Leo. Oh God, Leo. Adrian stood frozen in the center of the room. He felt like he had been punched in the gut. He stared at the boy. The dark curls, the shape of the nose. But it was the eyes, one green, one hazel. Heterochromia. It was a genetic trait in the Moretti bloodline. Julian had it. Adrian's grandfather had it. Adrian walked slowly towards them. Lucy clutched the boy tighter, backing away, until she hit the wall. Stay back, she warned. Adrian ignored her. He stopped 2 feet away and crouched down so he was eye level with the child. Hello, Adrian said, his voice surprisingly gentle. Leo blinked. Are you the bad man? Adrian let out a dry, humorless laugh. Yes, I suppose I am. He looked up at Lucy, his eyes burning with a mix of fury and awe. You hid him, Adrian whispered. You hid a Moretti heir in a crumbling apartment in Queens. I hid him from you, Lucy retorted. I didn't want him to end up like Julian. Adrian stood up, his face hardening back into the mask of the capo. He turned to Luca. Lock down the estate. Triple the guards. Call the council. What are you doing? Lucy asked, panic rising. Adrian turned back to her. You wanted to run away with Julian? Well, you got your wish. You're family now, Lucy. And no one leaves the family. You can't keep us here. I can, Adrian said, walking to the door, because that boy is the rightful heir to this empire, and I'll burn the city to the ground before I let anyone touch a hair on his head, including you. He slammed the door, the lock clicking shut with a sound of finality. Lucy sank to the floor, holding Leo, realizing she hadn't just dropped a locket. She had dropped a bomb. The first thing Lucy registered was the smell. It wasn't the damp musk of her basement apartment in Queens, nor the stale beer and industrial cleaner of the Obsidian. It was lavender beeswax and the crisp, indifferent scent of expensive linen. She opened her eyes. The ceiling was impossibly high, adorned with intricate crown molding that seemed to mock her. She was lying in a bed, large enough to sleep 4 people, covered in a duvet made of silk so fine it felt like woven water. Panic surged, sharp and immediate. She sat up, gasping. Beside her, a small mound under the covers stirred. A mop of dark curls poked out. Leo. He was still asleep, clutching his worn teddy bear, oblivious to the fact that his world had ended overnight. Lucy slid out of bed, her bare feet sinking into a Persian rug, thicker than any mattress she'd ever owned. She was still wearing her waitress uniform, stained with sweat, and the dried remnants of the scotch she'd spilled on Adrian. The black fabric felt alien against the oppressive luxury of the room. She moved to the windows. They were colossal floor-to-ceiling casements, draped in heavy velvet. She yanked them back. Morning light flooded the room, harsh and unforgiving. The view confirmed her worst fears. They were high up on a cliffside. Below the Atlantic Ocean, crashed violently against jagged rocks. The sprawling lawn was manicured to perfection, rimmed by a high stone wall topped with wrought iron spikes. At the gate she could see tiny figures in black suits patrolling with rifles slung over their shoulders. It wasn't a home. It was a fortress designed to keep the world out and them in. The heavy wooden door to the bedroom clicked open. Lucy spun around, placing herself between the door and the bed where Leo slept. Adrian Moretti entered. He had changed out of his ruined suit into a charcoal grey shirt with rolled-up sleeves and dark trousers. He looked fresher than he had the night before, but the shadows under his eyes were deeper, lending him a haunted, dangerous air. He carried a silver tray with a porcelain teapot, 2 cups and a glass of milk. "You're awake," he said. His voice was low, barely vibrating the air, yet it filled the massive room. "Let us go, Adrian," Lucy said, her voice trembling, despite her best efforts to sound firm. "This is kidnapping." Adrian set the tray down on a mahogany table near the fireplace. He poured tea with deliberate, almost meditative movements. "Kidnapping is what happens to people who don't matter. This," he gestured around the opulent room, "is protective custody. We don't need your protection. We were fine." Adrian stopped pouring. He slowly looked up, his dark eyes pinning her in place. "Fine. You were 2 days away from eviction. You work at a club owned by my rivals every other Tuesday, exposing yourself to men who would snap your neck for sport. And you were raising the son of Julian Moretti in a neighborhood where drug deals happen on the swing sets." He walked toward her, stopping just outside arm's reach. "You were not fine, Lucy. You were drowning. I just pulled you onto the lifeboat." "You didn't pull us," she hissed, keeping her voice low so as not to wake Leo. "You dragged us." "Semantics." He glanced past her at the sleeping boy. The sight seemed to cause him physical pain. His jaw tightened, a muscle feathering in his cheek. "He sleeps like Julian did, dead to the world." The mention of Julian brought a fresh wave of grief to Lucy's chest. Being here in his childhood home, surrounded by the wealth he had tried to escape for her, was agonizing. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered. "You hated that I had the locket. You were furious." "I was shocked," Adrian corrected. He ran a hand through his hair, momentarily breaking his composed facade. "For 5 years, I thought my brother died for nothing, a random act of violence in our violent world. Now I know he left something behind." He looked back at her, his gaze intense and unsettlingly possessive. "That boy has Moretti blood. He has the eyes. He is the rightful heir to everything you see, and a great deal you don't. Do you have any idea what my enemies would do if they knew he existed?" Lucy felt sick. "No one knows." "Someone always knows, Lucy. A whisper in a pawn shop, a nosy neighbor seeing those eyes. If the Russians or the Triads found him before I did, they wouldn't just kill him. They would use him against me. They would torture him to break me." The graphic nature of his words made her sway. Adrian reached out, steadying her with a hand on her arm. His touch was searing hot through her thin blouse. "Sit down before you fall down," he commanded, guiding her to a velvet armchair. He shoved a teacup into her shaking hands. "Drink." She took a sip. It was Earl Grey, strong and hot. "Here are the new rules," Adrian said, pacing in front of the fireplace. "You do not leave this estate. You do not make phone calls without my supervision. You do not speak to the staff unless it is to order food or service. Leo will be tutored here. You will be given a new wardrobe, as that rag you're wearing is offensive." "I'm not your prisoner," she argued weakly. Adrian stopped pacing. He leaned down, placing his hands on the arms of her chair, trapping her. His face was inches from hers. She could see the gold flecks in his dark irises, the razor-sharp intelligence that made him the most feared man in New York. "You are exactly what I say you are," he murmured, his breath ghosting across her cheek. "You are the mother of the future Don. That makes you the most valuable and most vulnerable woman in the city. Until I know who killed my brother, and until I am sure you weren't involved, you are mine to keep. Do you understand?" Lucy stared back at him, refusing to shrink away. In that moment, she realized that the man she had loved, the gentle Jay, had grown up with this wolf. They shared the same blood. "I understand," she said coldly, "that you are exactly the monster Julian said you were." Adrian flinched, a microscopic crack in his armor. He pulled back slowly, standing tall again. The ice returned to his eyes. "Good," he said. "Monsters keep you alive in this world, Lucy. Get the boy dressed. Breakfast is in 20 minutes. Don't be late." He turned and walked out the heavy door, sealing them back into their gilded cage. Lucy looked at the teacup in her hands. It was bone china, translucent and delicate. She had the sudden violent urge to throw it against the marble fireplace just to see something shatter. 3 days bled into one another. Time at the Moretti estate moved like molasses. It was a quietude that felt heavy, pregnant with unspoken threats. Lucy tried to create a routine for Leo. They ate breakfast in a dining room huge enough to host a parliamentary hearing, sat at a polished mahogany table so long that Lucy felt she needed a megaphone to speak to Adrian at the other end. Adrian was rarely present during the day. He vanished into the east wing of the mansion where his business was conducted. Lucy only saw the results of his work, sleek black cars arriving and departing in the dead of night, men in expensive suits, leaving with pale faces, and the constant underlying hum of high-stakes tension that vibrated through the floorboards. She and Leo were restricted to the West Wing, and the enclosed garden terrace. It was luxurious, yes. Leo had a playroom filled with more toys than he had ever seen in his life. Remote control cars, elaborate Lego sets, an entire library of children's books. But it felt hollow. On the fourth afternoon, while Leo was napping, Lucy wandered down the silent hallway of the West Wing. The walls were lined with portraits of unsmiling ancestors, men with hard eyes, and women wearing heavy jewelry like armor. She reached the end of the hall and found a set of double doors slightly ajar. It was a library 2 stories high, smelling of old paper and leather. She stepped inside. It felt like a sanctuary. She ran her fingers along the spines of leather-bound classics. As she moved toward the back of the room, near a large globe, she saw it. A smaller portrait tucked away in an alcove. It was Julian. Lucy's breath hitched. He looked younger in the painting, maybe 20 years old. He wasn't smiling, but his eyes held that gentle, mischievous spark she remembered. The artist had perfectly captured the mismatch of his eyes, the green and the hazel. She reached out her fingertips, tracing the gilded frame. "Jay," she whispered, a tear slipping down her cheek. "Where are we? What did you leave us in?" He hated that painting. Lucy gasped, spinning around. Adrian was standing in the entrance of the alcove. She hadn't heard him approach on the thick carpet. He was watching her, his expression unreadable. He held a tumbler of amber liquid ice, clinking softly. He said it made him look like a decadent prince. Adrian said, moving closer, his gaze fixed on his dead brother's face. He wanted to be an architect. "Did he tell you that—" Lucy nodded, wiping her tears hastily. "Yes. He used to draw sketches on napkins at the coffee shop. Bridges, skyscrapers." Adrian let out a short, bitter laugh. Bridges. He always wanted to build things, connect things. I was the one taught to burn them down. He took a sip of his drink, the silence stretching between them. For the first time, Lucy felt a strange sadness for Adrian. He seemed profoundly lonely, a king standing in the ruins of his own making. "Why didn't you let him go?" Lucy asked quietly. "If you knew he wanted out." Adrian turned his gaze from the painting to her. The intensity of it was almost unbearable. "Because we don't get out, Lucy. We are born into this. It's in the blood. Julian thought he could just walk away, change his name, wear cardigans, and pretend 5 generations of violence didn't exist in his veins." He took a step closer to her, his voice dropping to a growl. But it caught up to him. It always catches up. You think his death wasn't an accident, that it wasn't just because he was driving your car?" Adrian's eyes hardened to obsidian chips. "I don't think, Lucy. I know. The bomb under that car wasn't a simple ignition trap. It was military grade, expensive, precise. Someone wanted a Moretti dead. They didn't care which one." He leaned in close, trapping her against the bookshelf, just like he had in the study. The scent of whiskey and danger enveloped her. "And that is why you and Leo will never leave this house until I find the person who pressed the button. Because if they knew Julian had a son he loved enough to give our mother's locket to—" He stopped, his eyes dropping to her throat, where the locket used to rest. The air crackled between them. It wasn't just intimidation anymore. It was something darker, something hotter. A recognition of shared grief and a dangerous curiosity. Suddenly, a high-pitched alarm sliced through the silence of the mansion. Adrian instantly shifted from contemplative griever to lethal weapon. He grabbed Lucy's arm hard. "What is that?" she cried. "Perimeter breach," he snapped, already pulling her toward the door. South Lawn. Leo, my son, is upstairs. Luca is already with him. The nursery is the safest room in the house. Move. They burst into the main hallway. The previously silent house was chaotic. Guards with drawn weapons were sprinting toward the back stairs. Adrian didn't take her to the nursery. He dragged her into his own study, slamming the heavy oak door and throwing the deadbolt. He shoved her behind the massive desk. "Stay down," he ordered, pulling a large matte black handgun from a hidden holster beneath his jacket. He checked the chamber with a metallic clack that echoed in the room. "Adrian, what's happening?" Lucy was shaking, crouched on the floor. "Someone is testing my fences," he said, moving to the side of the window, peering out through the smallest crack in the velvet curtains. Outside, the sound of gunfire erupted short, sharp bursts of automatic weapon fire. Lucy covered her ears, squeezing her eyes shut, picturing Leo terrified in his bed. "They won't get in," Adrian said, his voice eerily calm over the noise outside. He wasn't looking at her. He was focused entirely on the threat. "But this proves my point, doesn't it, Lucy? You think the world outside is safe. You think you can just go back to waiting tables." He turned to look down at her, the gun held loosely at his side, like an extension of his hand. "Welcome to the family business." The gunfire ceased as abruptly as it had begun, leaving a ringing silence that was somehow louder than the explosions. In the study, Adrian remained motionless by the window, his silhouette cut from granite. He was listening not for noise, but for the specific rhythm of his security team's protocols. The all clear had a distinct cadence. "Is it over?" Lucy whispered. She was still crouched behind the massive oak desk, her knees pressed into the Persian rug. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. Adrian turned. The handgun was still in his grip, but he lowered it slightly. "The shooting has stopped. That doesn't mean it's over." He moved toward her, extending a hand. Lucy looked at it, large, scarred, capable of violence, and then up at his face. His eyes were devoid of fear, replaced by a cold, calculating rage that made him look terrifyingly like the predator everyone said he was. She took his hand. He pulled her up with an effortless strength that made her feel weightless. "Leo." She gasped, the adrenaline finally allowing her to speak the name that had been screaming in her head. "We go to him now," Adrian said. "Stay behind me. If I stop, you stop. If I tell you to run, you run to the panic room in the cellar. Do you understand?" "Yes." They exited the study. The hallway, usually a pristine corridor of silence and wealth, smelled of cordite and burnt rubber. Distant shouting echoed from the lower levels. As they passed the grand staircase, Lucy glanced down and stifled a scream. On the black and white marble of the foyer below, a body lay covered by a suit jacket. A pool of dark crimson was spreading slowly across the white tiles, reflecting the crystal chandelier above. "Don't look," Adrian commanded, his voice rough. He placed a hand on the back of her head, forcing her gaze forward. "That is the price of admission, Lucy. Keep walking." They reached the nursery in the west wing. The door was reinforced steel disguised with wood paneling. Adrian punched a code into a keypad hidden behind a sconce. The door hissed open. Inside the room was dimly lit. Luca was sitting on the floor, his back against a heavy dresser, a submachine gun resting on his knees. In the corner under a tent made of blankets, a small flashlight beam wavered. "Boss," Luca grunted, standing up. He looked disheveled, a smear of soot on his cheek. "Perimeter is secure. We lost Tony at the gate. 2 hostiles down, 1 in custody." Adrian nodded a singular, sharp motion. "The boy, under the fort." Luca pointed to the blankets. Lucy rushed past them, dropping to her knees and lifting the edge of the blanket tent. Leo was curled into a ball, his eyes wide and wet, clutching the teddy bear so hard his knuckles were white. "Mommy," his voice trembled. "There were fireworks." "Yes, baby?" Lucy choked out, pulling him into her arms and burying her face in his soft curly hair. He smelled of baby shampoo and innocence, a stark contrast to the metallic scent of death in the hallway. "Just fireworks. It's okay. I'm here." Adrian watched them from the doorway, his expression fractured for a split second. Seeing the woman clutching the child, his brother's child. Something ancient and protective roared to life in his chest. It was a feeling he hadn't experienced since Julian was alive, a desire to burn the world down, to keep the smoke away from them. "Luca," Adrian said, his voice dropping to a gravelly whisper. "Who was it?" "Russians," Luca replied. "But they had inside info, boss. They knew the shift change schedule. They knew the blind spot in the cameras on the south wall." Adrian's eyes narrowed. "A rat." "Looks like it." Adrian looked back at Lucy and Leo. The boy was looking over Lucy's shoulder, staring at Adrian with those mismatched eyes, green and hazel. Adrian stepped into the room. The air felt too small for him. He approached them slowly, holstering his gun so as not to scare the child further. "Leo," Adrian said. The boy blinked. "Are the bad fireworks gone?" Adrian crouched down. He didn't smile. "Adrian." Moretti didn't smile, but his face softened the hard lines around his mouth, relaxing. "I made them leave. They won't come back." Leo studied him with a child's devastating honesty. "My daddy is in heaven. Mommy says he watches us." Adrian swallowed hard. The lump in his throat felt like broken glass. "I know. He watches me too." He stood up abruptly, the moment too heavy to sustain. He turned to Lucy. "You stay here tonight. Luca will stand guard outside the door. No one comes in but me." "Where are you going?" Lucy asked, fear spiking again. She didn't want to be left alone, even with Luca. Surprisingly, the safest she felt was near Adrian. "I have to go downstairs," Adrian said, his voice turning into ice. "I have a guest in the basement, and I need to ask him who sold us out." "Adrian." Lucy stood up, holding Leo's hand. "Don't." "Don't what?" He turned his eyes pitch black. "Don't do what is necessary." "They shot at my house, Lucy. They shot at you. If I don't go down there and become the monster they fear, they will return tomorrow with a bigger army." He walked to the door, pausing with his hand on the frame. "Sleep well, Lucy. Tonight the devil is on your side." The interrogation had lasted 4 hours. It was 3:00 a.m. when Adrian finally emerged from the cellar. He had showered in the gym downstairs, scrubbing the physical evidence of his work from his skin, but he couldn't scrub the darkness from his soul. He walked into the main kitchen, a cavernous space of stainless steel and cold marble. He needed a drink. Not whiskey, he needed water. His throat was raw from shouting. He didn't turn on the lights. The moonlight streaming through the high windows was enough. He opened the massive refrigerator, the light spilling out, and grabbed a glass bottle of water. Did he talk? Adrian froze. He closed the fridge door slowly. Lucy was sitting at the kitchen island. She was wearing a silk robe he had provided her hair loose around her shoulders. She looked like a ghost in the moonlight, ethereal and out of place in his house of war. "You should be asleep," Adrian said, unscrewing the cap and taking a long drink. I couldn't sleep, she said softly. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard the gunshots. She traced the pattern of the marble counter with her finger. You didn't answer me. Did he talk? Adrian walked around the island, leaning his hips against the counter opposite her. He talked, eventually. Who was it? A rival faction, the Volkovs. But that's not the problem. Adrian ran a hand over his face, looking exhausted. The problem is how they got in. They had the codes Lucy. Codes that only 3 people possess. Lucy felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. Who? Me. Luca. Adrian paused, his gaze drifting to the window. And my uncle, Sal. Your uncle? Lucy gasped. Family. In my world, family is usually who holds the knife, Adrian said bitterly. Sal was the one who insisted Julian shouldn't marry the Chicago girl. Sal was the one who handled the logistics the night Julian died. He pushed off the counter and began to pace the energy in the room, shifting from exhaustion to restless agitation. I've been blind, Adrian muttered more to himself than her. I thought Julian was killed because of me, because he was driving my car. But what if he was the target all along? What if Sal knew Julian wanted out, and knew that if Julian left, the family would look weak? Lucy stood up. She walked around the island, approaching him. She saw the tremor in his hands. Hands that had likely inflicted terrible pain hours ago. Adrian, she said. He stopped pacing and looked at her. For the first time, the barrier between them, the capo and the waitress, felt thin. Julian told me something, she whispered. The last night I saw him, he was nervous. He gave me the locket and he said, she furrowed her brow, searching her memory. He said, if anything happens to me, don't trust the man with the silver cane. Adrian's blood ran cold. He went perfectly still. What did you say, the man with the silver cane? Lucy repeated. I never knew what it meant. I thought he was speaking in metaphors. Adrian let out a breath that sounded like a curse. Uncle Sal, he walked with a silver-tipped cane after his stroke 3 years ago. But, wait. Adrian's eyes narrowed. Sal didn't need the cane 5 years ago. He was healthy when Julian died. Then who? Lucy asked. Sal used to carry a cane as a fashion statement in the 90s, Adrian murmured, his mind racing connecting dots that had been scattered for half a decade. Or, it wasn't Sal. It was someone Sal was working with. He looked at Lucy, really looked at her. He saw the strength in her jaw, the fire in her eyes. She wasn't just a complication anymore. She was the key. You just gave me the missing piece, Adrian said softly. He took a step closer to her. The distance between them vanished. He reached out his hand, hovering near her face, before his thumb grazed her cheekbone. His touch was rough, calloused, but incredibly gentle. Lucy held her breath. Her heart was pounding not from fear this time, but from a sudden magnetic pull. You look so much like him, she whispered, her voice breaking. But your eyes, they're so sane. I'm not him, Lucy. Adrian rasped, his voice dropping to a low rumble. I can't be him. He was the light. I'm the shadow that keeps the light from burning out. He leaned in. It was inevitable. The gravity of the trauma, the secret, the shared danger, it pulled them together. Lucy didn't pull away. She tilted her head up. Adrian's lips brushed hers, a tentative testing pressure. It wasn't the kiss of a lover. but of a drowning man finding air. Then he pulled back sharply, as if burned. He turned away, gripping the edge of the counter until his knuckles turned white. "Go to bed, Lucy. Go upstairs before I make a mistake we can't come back from." "Adrian, go!" He roared, the command cracking through the quiet kitchen. Lucy flinched, but she didn't run. She looked at his back, seeing the tension in his shoulders, the burden he was carrying. "You don't have to carry it alone," she said softly. She turned and left the kitchen. Adrian waited until her footsteps faded. Then he pulled his phone from his pocket. He dialed a number. "Luca," he said, his voice void of all emotion. "Get the car. We're paying Uncle Sal a visit. And bring the shovel." The rain over Brooklyn was torrential, a curtain of water that blurred the city lights into streaks of neon and grey. The black Cadillac moved through the storm, like a shark through deep water, silent and lethal. Inside, Adrian sat in the back, checking his weapon for the third time. The magazine clicked into place, a sound of finality. Beside him, Luca drove with white-knuckled precision. They hadn't spoken since they left the estate. There was nothing left to say. The betrayal was a rot, and tonight they were cutting off the limb. They pulled up to a brownstone in Dyker Heights. It was an unassuming house for a man who controlled half the unions in the city, but Uncle Sal liked to play the part of the humble grandfather. "Wait here," Adrian ordered, buttoning his suit jacket. "If I'm not out in 20 minutes, burn the house down." Luca nodded, his eyes grim. "With pleasure, boss." Adrian walked up the steps, the rain soaking his hair instantly. He didn't knock. He used a key he hadn't touched in years. The hallway smelled of garlic cigar smoke and old betrayal. He found Salvatore Moretti in his study, sitting by a roaring fire, reading a newspaper. A silver-tipped cane leaned against his armchair, gleaming in the firelight like a serpent's tooth. Sal looked up, not surprised. He was a heavy man, with a face like a bulldog, and eyes that had seen and ordered too much death. "Adrian," Sal rumbled, folding the paper. "A bit late for a family visit, isn't it? And you look wet. Like a drowned rat." Adrian didn't smile. He walked into the room, dripping water onto the Persian rug. He didn't sit. He stood tall, blocking the warmth of the fire. "I had a chat with the Russians tonight, Sal." Sal's expression didn't flicker. "Those savages, always causing trouble. I told you we should have wiped them out last summer." "They knew the codes," Adrian said softly. "The codes only 3 people have." Sal sighed, a long, weary sound. He reached for his cane, his hand gripping the silver head, a wolf's head. "Technology, Adrian. Hackers. The world isn't what it used to be. You can't trust machines." "And Julian?" Adrian took a step closer. "Could we trust him?" Sal froze. The air in the room grew heavy, suffocating. "Julian was a good boy," Sal said, his voice dropping. "But he was soft. He wanted to leave. He wanted to take the family secrets and run off with some waitress. He was a leak waiting to spring." "So you plugged the leak?" Adrian whispered. The rage was building in his chest, hot and blinding, but his voice remained ice cold. "You put a bomb in my car. You knew he took my car that night. You watched him drive away to his death." Sal stood up, leaning heavily on the cane. The mask of the kindly uncle slipped, revealing the ruthless consigliere beneath. "It had to be done." Sal barked, his face reddening. He was going to destroy us. "A Moretti does not walk away. I did it for the family. I did it for you, Adrian. You were always the strong one, the true king. Julian was just a spare." Adrian stared at the man who had taught him how to tie a tie, how to shoot a gun, how to lead. He wasn't a spare. He was my brother. Sal sneered. He was a liability. And now I hear you're harboring his bastard and the woman. You're making the same mistake, Adrian, letting sentiment cloud your judgment. Sal tapped the cane on the floor once, twice. Suddenly the door behind Adrian clicked. A hidden panel in the bookshelf slid open. 2 of Sal's personal guards stepped out, guns raised. I knew you'd figure it out eventually, Sal said, shrugging. You're smart, but you're alone. It's a shame, Adrian. I really didn't want to prune the tree again. Adrian didn't turn around to look at the gunman. He kept his eyes locked on Sal. You think I came here alone, Uncle? Adrian asked, tilting his head. Sal frowned. Luca is outside. My men are watching the street. Adrian reached into his pocket. Sal flinched, but Adrian only pulled out a phone. He pressed a single button and tossed it onto the desk. It was a live audio feed. From outside. Pop. Pop. 2 suppressed shots. Then silence. Then Luca's voice crackled through the speaker. Street is clear, boss. Backyard is clear. The house is yours. Sal's face went pale. The 2 guards behind Adrian hesitated, glancing at each other. Put the guns down, Adrian said, not raising his voice. And you walk out of here alive. Keep them up, and you die with him. The guards were mercenaries. They knew the shift in power when they felt it. Slowly they lowered their weapons, backed away, and vanished through the hidden door. Sal was alone. Truly alone. He gripped his cane, his knuckles white. You can't do this. I am your blood. You lost that right when you spilled Julian's, Adrian said. He walked forward, closing the distance. Sal swung the cane, a desperate, vicious strike, aimed at Adrian's head. Adrian caught it mid-air with one hand. He wrenched it from the old man's grip and snapped it over his knee. The silver wolf's head rolled across the floor, coming to a stop by the fire. Sal stumbled back, falling into his chair, gasping for air. Adrian, please. Adrian looked down at him. There was no joy in this. Only duty. Only the grim necessity of a world built on violence. Lucy told me what Julian said, Adrian murmured. Beware the man with the silver cane. He leaned down. He knew, Sal. In the end, he knew it was you. Adrian turned and walked toward the door. Where are you going? Sal wheezed. Adrian. Adrian stopped at the threshold. To my family. He walked out into the rain. Behind him, Luca entered the study, closing the door softly. A moment later, a single shot rang out, swallowed by the thunder. The sun was rising when the Cadillac returned to the cliffside estate. The storm had broken, leaving the sky a bruised purple and gold. Adrian walked into the house. He was exhausted, his soul feeling scoured and raw. He climbed the stairs to the west wing, his steps heavy. He opened the door to the bedroom. Lucy was awake. She was sitting in the armchair by the window, Leo asleep in her lap. She looked up as he entered. She didn't ask what happened. She saw the void in his eyes, the finality of his posture. She knew. Adrian walked over to them. He sank to his knees on the rug, eye level with Leo's sleeping face. He reached out his hand, hovering, shaking slightly before resting it on the boy's back. It's done, Adrian whispered. Lucy reached out and covered Adrian's hand with hers. Her skin was warm, alive. It anchored him. Is it over? She asked softly. The threat is gone, Adrian said. He looked up at her, his dark eyes searching hers. But this life, It's never really over, Lucy. The wolves are always circling. Then let them circle, Lucy said, her voice fierce, a newfound strength steeling her spine. She squeezed his hand. We're not rabbits anymore, Adrian. We're part of the pack. Adrian looked at her, Hilly, looked at her. And for the first time in 5 years, the ice around his heart cracked completely. He saw the fire in her, the loyalty that matched his own. She wasn't just a waitress. She wasn't just a mother. She was a queen in the making. He leaned forward, pressing his forehead against hers. They breathed together in the quiet morning light, bound by blood secrets and a love that had risen from the ashes of a ghost. "Welcome home," Adrian whispered. Lucy closed her eyes, holding on to the man who was both their monster and their savior. "We're not going anywhere." And that is the story of how a single broken necklace toppled an empire. What started as a waitress's worst nightmare became the catalyst for unearthing a 5-year-old conspiracy. Adrian Moretti found more than just his brother's ghost that night. He found the future of his family and a woman strong enough to stand beside him in the darkness. It's a reminder that sometimes the things we try hardest to hide, like a locket under a uniform, are the very things that set us free. In the world of the Mafia, blood might be the currency, but loyalty is the only thing that buys you a tomorrow. Wow, that was a heavy ride. I have to ask you guys a question. If you were Lucy and you found out your secret boyfriend was the heir to a crime family, would you have hidden the child, or would you have gone to Adrian for help? Let me know your choice in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story and want more dark romance, suspense and twists, please do me a huge favor. Smash that like button, hit subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new story. We have a crazy thriller coming up next week that you won't want to miss. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next chapter.